Welcome to Tony Martignetti nonprofit radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2014. We are at the Marriott Marquis Hotel in Times Square, New York City. With me now is Marci Brenholz. Her seminar topic is How to Ask When You Aren't Asking. Marci is Director of Development for the Ralph Lauren Center for Cancer Care and Prevention. Marci Brenholz, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be here.
Oh, thank you. What a pleasure. Pleasure to have you. How to ask when you aren't asking. Right. What are nonprofits not quite getting right about stewardship?
Well, I think, in this day and age, we have a lot of focus on acquisition, and acquisition is really expensive. So there's direct costs like buying lists if you're doing direct mail. There's also staff costs for prospect research and things like that. It's a lot less expensive to hold on to the donors you already have, but it's not the easiest thing to do. So in the seminar, I'm going to kind of break it down into two things that you can do. One is getting your house in order at your organization. So meaning your acknowledgement process is streamlined. You have a great way of recognizing staff. You might redo your cash report, some kind of really boring things like that. Make an assessment of what kind of stewardship each department is doing if you're a bigger organization. And then the more fun part of it is to think about what you have to offer to your donors that's really special. Do you have access to celebrities? And that doesn't necessarily mean, Beyonce and Jay-Z. It could be an expert in the field where you work. It could be a great event that you do. You could add on a opening session for special donors. There could be travel, any number of things that you can do to make donors really feel like they're part of your work.
All right. So why don't we start with the more dry, but still important, right? You got to get yourself in order before you can go outside.
Yeah.
We have a good amount of time together, so where should we start with assessing? I mean, how do we figure out what do we need to look at to figure out where we are, and then we'll look at where we got to go?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the size of your organization. So The case study that I'm going to use is from the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, where I worked for about 3.5 years. It's a bigger organization, a bigger staff. So what we did is we put together a working group. I mean, people hear the words working group and just generally roll their eyes, but sometimes they can be effective. We made sure we had representation from all of our departments, and during the first meeting, we just talked about what we thought would be challenging for donor retention. So at a place like the U.S. Fund, for instance, we acquired a lot of donors through emergencies, the Indian Ocean tsunami, the Haiti earthquake, et cetera. And then we really struggled to have plans about holding on to those donors.
Okay.
So we talked a lot about whether we were being donor-centric as an organization. So
I've had two interviews. You're my second interview so far. And the first one was all about donor-centrism. He was CEO of Food for the Poor in Florida and concerned about donor-centrism as well, but trying to make it true, not just a flash phrase that doesn't really have meaning behind it.
Yeah, it's kind of a buzzword, but the way I think about being donor-centered, and if it's not kind of resonating for you, every fundraiser kind of has low moments. Why did I become a fundraiser? Why am I doing this? And for me, going back to being donor-centric can make you feel better in a way. If you think about why donors are giving to you and how much of their time and personal resources they're devoting because they believe in your cause, it makes you want to be donor-centric. It makes you want to be a good friend in a way. If you have a friend who's incredibly supportive and thoughtful, who remembers your birthday, always asks you about important things in your life, who shows up at your party with a great hostess gift every time, and then you do nothing in return, you're not being a good friend. So that's like being donor-centric. If the donor is so generous to you, but you're not respectful of his or her wishes, you're just not doing the right thing. There's such a thing as doing the right thing, right? Yeah. So,
well, where should we look specifically to determine whether we are doing the right thing?
Well,
our marketing communications, our which includes the website and print, and let's drill down to some of the things we should be looking at specifically.
I think probably where to start is financial accountability. That's also kind of a buzzword these days, I think, but making sure that you're letting your donors know, and this is the drier stuff. Again, this is the getting your house in order stuff.
Yep.
Making sure that your donors know where their money is going and making sure that you're respecting where they told you they wanted it to go. there's some great donors who say, here's some money. I don't care what you do. It can be operating costs. It can be salaries. And then there are other donors who say, no, I really wanted to go to this specific program. And we have to make sure that we're being accountable to the donors.
And I like your word too, respectful.
Yeah.
Respectful of what their wish is when they do make a designation.
Right. Back to the friendship example. It's just what's the right thing in the friendship, in the exchange.
Yeah.
You mentioned website. It's a great point. There are all of these charity rating organizations now, including Charity Navigator, who look at two things. They look at your finances, so they'll read through your audited financial statements and your 990s. They also want to see certain things posted on your website, and that includes your audits and your 990s and your leadership staff. And you have to really be telling donors how you run your organization and not be afraid of letting them in. I think we're often afraid that donors will find something out about us that they don't like. And that's what marketing communications is for. It's for telling the story. But you really do have to be pretty open with your donors, I think, in the more sophisticated days where we live. So making sure that stuff is up on your website is great for ratings on Charity Navigator, but again, it's just the right thing to do also.
Interesting parallel about not fearing letting donors in.
Right.
I think of a parallel with social media. Everybody's got a Facebook page now, but the early fear was, well, what if donors post comments that we don't like?
Right.
And there haven't been many instances of that, and when it does happen, it's an open communication. And if it's, of course, if it's blatant and doesn't belong, it can always be eliminated, deleted. But that's the rare exception.
Yeah.
It's a conversation, right? It's a dialogue, and so we shouldn't fear the openness. And now Facebook pages are rampant.
Yeah.
But 4 or 5 years ago, probably wasn't even as many. 4 or 5 years ago, the fear was, well, we can't let donors post on our new Facebook page. They might say things we don't like.
Right. Yeah, reputational risk is obviously huge. And the problem with the Google accessible world, right, is that you can find, if there was a faux pas in a nonprofit's past, it's just like any person, it's going to be on the internet. So if some risk to your reputation occurs, it lasts forever. So it makes a lot of sense that we're apprehensive, but I think you're making a great point. If someone comes out, whether it's on your Facebook page or if they send you a private message and says, I'm really worried about some aspect of your business practices. I'm really worried about your program design. It's a great opportunity to be able to say, you know what, this is how we really do it. Let's have a conversation. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot to manage. It's a lot more to manage than we've ever had. But I agree. It's a good opportunity to be out there.
And that person who's saying that to you cares about you.
Yeah.
If they didn't care, they would have just written you off and said, they're screwing it up. I'm not going to bother. But they do care enough to learn, and they're even trying to help.
Yeah. And just to bring it back to donor retention, to our topic, if someone cares and they have a concern and you address it, you probably have that person for life, right? I mean, if you're honest, if you're open, if you're thoughtful about how you're telling your story, you're going to be able to hang on to donors, and it's better in the long run for your business.
What else should we be doing internally? Getting our own house in order? Where else should we look?
So I think once you're kind of clear that you're out there, that you're financially accountable, then a lot of what I encountered when I was looking at stewardship, again, I'm using the U.S. fund as an example, but this is applicable to other places too, is how motivated staff were to retain donors. So sometimes the way organizations put together their cash report or the way that they recognize fundraisers might recognize acquisition more than it recognizes retention. So just making sure that you're making sure that it's really a priority for your staff. And
that they're being recognized and evaluated on the right kind of metrics.
Right.
Retention as well as acquisition.
Yeah, exactly. And internally, a lot of organizations have started to measure their retention, but they don't necessarily measure upgrades or donor satisfaction. And I'm just going to name check here because this is not something that I thought of. This is actually from Karen Osborne of the Osborne Group. And these are her recommendations specifically to measure retention, upgrades, and donor satisfaction as a way to make sure that you have a healthy stewardship or donor relations program going on.
Okay.
So some organizations are not even measuring retention necessarily, so that's a great place to start. But measuring how often you're moving the donors up the pipeline, that's also really helpful. And then whether or not donors think that your mission is crucial, whether they feel that you're one of their top 5 organizations, how committed are they to you, that reflects on how you're communicating with them.
How do you judge these things?
Well, if you have a donor database, again, I'm talking about a little bit of a bigger organization, you can actually run reports on these kinds of things. You can set them up in an...
Oh, I meant...
sorry.
That's okay. No, I meant... do donors feel that your mission is critical? Are you one of the top 5 charities? That's got to all be done by survey, conversation?
Yeah. So if you want to you can do a donor satisfaction survey with smaller donors. You can do it online, but you can also sit down. When you're talking about major donors or board members, you can do individual interviews with them where you're really not asking them. So why I called the session How to Ask When You're Not Asking. I hope everyone doesn't show up and think, oh, good, I don't have to solicit anymore. Marci's going to tell me how.
Yeah, no.
Right. It's more, what are the moves that you're doing in between the asks that are making the donor feel really good and really invested in you? So sitting down and talking to them about what they think about the organization without asking them to write a check could be a good move. You know that old saying, if you want to ask for money, ask for advice?
Yeah, right.
It's like that. So you would do it face-to-face, or you could do, an online survey or something like that and agree maybe to do it every 2 or 3 years. What I'm talking about really takes a lot of resources, and not every small organization. So now I'm a one-person shop at my new job. And this kind of thing is probably going to be a little bit more challenging than it was when I had more resources at a bigger place. So there's that too.
But you're going to find a way.
Yeah.
So a one-person fundraising shop, you are talking to donors a lot.
Yeah, all day.
So some of these questions could weave their way into your daily conversations with donors. Maybe not every one,
right?
But you can sample, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm doing, so there was a 1-year gap between development directors at the Ralph Lauren Center. So some of the things that I'm doing there are sort of resurrecting some relationships that we had before. And I'm making sure that there's no stone unturned. If you've given money to us before, if you've cared about us before, I'm going to try to bring you back. You can't be successful all the time. You're going to lose some donors. People's circumstances change. It might have nothing to do with your organization, but it's really important to make sure that you're being very methodical about renewing.
Let's switch to the more fun, the donor side of good donor stewardship.
Yeah. So I had a great experience, again, at the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, where I put together our major donor giving society, now ably managed by another colleague at the U.S. Fund. But we decided to do, back to serving donors, we decided to talk to our board members about what they might like to see. So when you structure a major donor giving society, you're basically putting together a list of tiered benefits. And that's also an important part of putting your house in order.
Yeah.
What are you offering to donors at different levels? Is it consistent? Who are the donors that your leadership and board members need to be involved with? And do you have plans for how to steward those donors? So U.S. Fund for UNICEF is lucky. They have a lot of board members. So they have a national board and then 7 regional boards. So
some people may say that's very unlucky, and
that's true.
Thankfully, it was fortunate for the U.S. Fund.
Yeah, it was. I mean, these board members are great. I'm a board relations person, so I think that's great. And some people think it's a nightmare. Yep. Now I have an 8-person board, so I've gone from But they have probably about 125 board members between all those groups. And we did some surveying of them, and I'm not saying that these are the answers you would get from every group of board members, but this is the kind of thing that, on your terrible worst day, you just think about it and feel good. These board members were like, I don't care about recognition. That's fine. I just want to be more connected to the mission. I just want to talk to the workers in the field and really understand what you do. They were looking for these really meaningful engagement opportunities. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I'd like a tote bag, or I'd really like to meet Beyonce when I'm name checking her. Maybe she'll call me. They really wanted more programmatic depth, and they also wanted to network and connect with each other. So we tried to build benefits that felt a little bit less transactional and more kind of life affirming.
Like what? What were a couple of examples?
Well, again, this is not something that everyone can offer, but travel to the field is an example. At a certain
but a small organization maybe it's not travel to an exotic country, but maybe welcome to our office.
Yeah.
To the place where we're serving people that you've never seen. I mean, we internally take it for granted because it's on the floor below us, or it's down the hall. But our donors have never seen it. However modest you may think it is, it might mean the world to the donor to be invited, right?
Absolutely. I mean, at the Ralph Lauren Center, so I work on site at the Cancer Center. It's in Harlem on 124th and Madison. I'll be honest, a lot of donors don't go up to that neighborhood very often. Because of the involvement of Ralph Lauren, the center is really beautiful looking. And I love walking in there every day and seeing the patients in the waiting room. It's a very unhappy time for the patients, but I feel really connected to them and to the mission. And we do a lot of site visits at the Ralph Lauren Center. Before UNICEF, I worked at a education nonprofit called Learning Leaders, and we did school volunteerism. So we used to do a lot of site visits to schools, and that was great. And whenever I was feeling kind of disconnected at Learning Leaders, I would get up and go to a school and be like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. The travel with UNICEF is a little sexier.
Right, but every charity has got some place that you can come.
Yes, absolutely.
Or some meeting that you can come to that you haven't previously been invited to.
Yeah.
Something is going on at your charity.
I just went to a special events training session at Robin Hood. So the Ralph Lauren Center is a Robin Hood grantee. And the special events staff was sharing that their donors love to come to their office and just see where the work is done. So
just the administrative, like ministerial type offices.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff that the people who work there take for granted every day. It has no interest. I mean, it has interest to them, but they would never think of inviting an outsider. But we got to stop thinking like that. Mm-hmm. They're not outsiders. They're insiders, and we want to welcome them to the workplace.
Yeah.
Maybe you do it one day a month. Mm-hmm. You have invite a bunch of people and have a breakfast, and maybe that half a day a month becomes more donor-centric than the other 19 and a half work days that you have in the month.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I found the responses from the board members at the U.S. Fund so encouraging, because they were saying exactly what you were saying. We want to know how you do your work. We want to really drill down with you. We're not necessarily looking for lots of glitzy stuff. We want the day-to-day. And it kind of relates to financial accountability also.
Fixing your mic so it doesn't fall off the table.
Thank
there
you.
Go. You're
right,
good.
I'm getting violent with my mic.
Better that than me.
Yeah.
Although we're close enough, you could, but I appreciate you not breaking down that
you haven't done anything
barrier
yet. It's been okay. I'm not feeling aggressive.
All right. I'll mind myself. All right. I won't cross the line either.
This relates back to financial accountability. Again, if we're afraid to let donors in, then they're not going to come closer to us, and we want them to be closer to us. Not every single donor, but the important ones and the ones who care. So, yeah. Okay. That's the interesting part.
So at U.S. Fund for UNICEF, it was travel abroad. But you've made it clear that it could be traveling to your administrative office.
Yes.
What else did you do on the outside?
It can be also individualized reporting. So back to how donors want their money spent. A lot of us do kind of a general operating support report, which is okay. But at certain levels, you really want to make sure that you're doing an individualized report. And, I think most of us do this. But that was included because UNICEF being such a big place, sometimes people were getting a more generalized report and not feeling like we were really drilling down into the program that they wanted to support. Then we did a couple of other things, like at the higher levels, dinner hosted by a board member, dinner hosted by the global UNICEF executive director. So that thing that I said about celebrities before, a lot of people think that Tony Lake, who's the executive director of UNICEF globally, is a celebrity in the world of international charitable work,
Right.
people really want to meet Mr. Lake, and he's more of an academic than he is anything else. But that's really interesting to donors. So we did travel to see UNICEF's work in the field, and then UNICEF has some other interesting international properties to visit. There's a research center in Florence. There's a supply division in Copenhagen. So travel to those places also, which is, again, inner workings.
Yeah. Okay, but we covered travel.
Yeah.
By the way, your phone is ringing. I think it is Beyonce.
Good.
I heard a phone ringing.
But this is more important. I mean, I'll get to her after.
I agree. It is. You're everything in the world in your life has brought you to this moment.
Exactly.
You don't want to surrender it to Beyonce.
No.
Besides, it might have been someone else's phone I heard.
I hope so.
She could actually be calling someone else.
I always keep mine on silent.
She could be calling
It's
someone
important.
else. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
You're next on the list, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
What else? Fun
What
stuff.
else did we put on there? So receptions before big events, if you're having a gala.
Right? You don't have to spend a lot of money to add a small reception before you've already got the space. The caterer is already coming.
Yeah.
The marginal cost of that before or after reception, not very great, right?
Especially when you're putting on a bigger event.
Yeah.
And that gets to the donors wanting to network with each other and to know each other. They don't always get to be in the same place either. And, a board meeting or another kind of meeting isn't always the best place to network. So something like that, which is
I
pretty
do
simple.
a lot. My work is planned giving consulting.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of those VIP receptions before the larger event.
Right.
Another thing that doesn't cost much is VIP seating at an event.
Yeah.
It costs nothing. It costs like a couple of strips of masking tape.
Yeah.
To mask off an area and have VIP seating for an event you've already paid for the tickets for. You've already got the seats. Rope off 10 or 12 seats for VIPs. People feel like the world. Oh, they gave us VIP seats.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about that? We're all already doing it, right? When you think about it, when you're doing your gala seating, you are putting your most important people in the front, but they don't know that. We're not revealing our methods. So if you make that a little more open and say, by the way, we're going to give you the best seats. You're this important. I think, we're continuing on that theme of tell your donors what you're doing, and it might make them feel good. So, yeah, agreed.
Okay. What else? We still have a couple minutes left, Marci. What else can we talk about?
Well, we could talk about volunteer opportunities, maybe. I think that is a big thing that's emerging.
Volunteers helping with stewardship?
Donors having volunteer opportunities to make them feel more engaged.
Okay.
I think it's emerging as a theme because corporate supporters often are asking, well, how can my employees come for a day and do something? And it's a little bit difficult for some organizations to figure out how to do that. I had the luck, this is back to sometimes stewardship moves are a little easier at one place or another, or a little more obvious. When I worked at a volunteer organization, I got a lot of my donors and my board members through a pipeline of one particular volunteer program, which was an art program. And it just attracted the kind of volunteers who were also able to be donors.
Yeah.
Not everybody has that. So Ralph Lauren Center does a lot of stuff with our physical plants, having people come in and paint, having people come in and plant flowers outside. I just think it's important to make sure that you have at least a couple, just up your sleeve and ready to go, a couple of volunteer opportunities in case either a corporate supporter asks or, a group of board members or a group of donors say, I don't really feel like writing another check. What can I do? So that's, I think that's big. And a lot of donors also want to do things that involve their children and family. Family philanthropy is such a big emerging topic. So if you can think of a program or a volunteer opportunity where people can bring their children, that's also huge.
We have just a couple minutes left. What about the board's role in stewardship?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question.
Okay, well, I come up with one. It only took me about 24 minutes.
Well, I mean, this is like a house in order. It's it's the more kind of the more boring stuff. So I had mentioned that a board-hosted annual dinner could be an interesting, big stewardship move.
Right.
But thank you calls, thank you notes, all those kinds of things.
I hear that from a lot of guests. Just get the board together, do it for an hour before a meeting.
Right.
and they're going to get a great feeling from it themselves. And you're just right. You're just calling to say thank you.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Don't do anything more. We're not asking for anything more. I'm just calling to say thank you. And a donor has gotten a call from a VIP in the organization. It's a board member.
It's really big.
It's a big deal.
People, a lot of people in the international world love to support the Carter Center because the Carter Center does great work, but also Jimmy Carter calls you. I've had a bunch of donors be like, President Carter called me. Okay, so not everybody has Jimmy Carter, but it's still important to hear from, a leadership voice. If you
mentioned the executive director, who's not really thought of as a celebrity in
the world.
In popular media, but within the organization and within that mission, he's very well known.
Yeah.
So it could just be somebody in your office.
Exactly. And also, I didn't mention loyalty recognition. I think calling donors and thanking them for a gift that they've just given is fantastic. Don't take that off of your roster. But 5 years in a row, 10 years in a row, calling them to thank.
Irrespective of the size of the gift,
exactly.
Right? Just that kind of loyalty recognition for that history.
Yeah. How gracious and thoughtful is that? If you just say, thank you for giving to us for 5 consecutive years. We really appreciate it. That's it.
And we didn't care how much it was.
Right.
Yeah. Marci, thank you very much. We have to leave it there.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Marci Brenholz. She is Director of Development for the Ralph Lauren Center for Cancer Care and Prevention. Thank you very much, Marci, again.
Thank you.
You're listening to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2014.